where I'm at Allen Heath, and a couple of the reps that I knew were there, and a couple of the salespeople on work kind of chatting away, and a guy had come by and asked to see one of the, in terms of actually mixing, was there something that they could kind of show him? He was kind of struggling with some of his vocalists. And the rep looked at me and he goes, "You want to take this?" And I said, "Yep, I got you." So we walk over to they had a D-Live 7000.
Yep.
And I showed him, as I'm taking him through this, the guy is looking at me and he tells me, he's explaining the problem, and I'm trying to figure this out. And what's happening is my background vocals, they don't come to life, and they're competing, and I can't get it out front, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Are you doing stereo? What are you doing?" And I asked him anyway, the bottom line is I take him through this, and I'm showing him this trick that I do to get the background vocals to really have their own life. And one of the things that I'm a firm believer in when I mix is you don't put any two things in the same spot in your image in stereo. So when you're panning, you don't want any two things so if you look at it like an analog clock and you have 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whatever, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, everything has its place.
Even with the podcast, you and I are not in the same spot in the stereo mix.
No.
We're very close to each other, because if I went hard left and right, you folks listening would hate it. But we're just a little separate. It's the same with
the ears too.
Yes. Yeah. With mixing in ears, if you can get them stereo. Yeah.
And you don't want anything really hard panned, except if you have two things exactly the same. So if you have like two acoustic guitars and you only need them percussively, not for pitch.
Yeah.
For your ears, you bring them down and you can have them harder, but I don't like anything really hard pan.
No. And I also, when I'm mixing my ears, if I have the opportunity to do it with stereo, nothing gets to live dead center. Nothing.
Oh, no. Well,
even snare drum is a hair off of dead center. It's a hair to the left.
Because it's in your brain is
Correct.
Not in the center.
Correct.
It should always be as you see it. Anyway, so I'm going through this thing with this guy. We're standing there and I'm taking him through the console.
And you're going to share your tip? Was your tip for highlighting background vocals the stereo thing, or are you going to get to that?
I mean, it's part of it.
You'll get to that. All right, great.
Basically, so the short answer is that where he had 5 vocals on stage, 2 were leading, 3 were BGVs.
Okay.
The 3 BGVs go on a BGV bus with its own reverb.
Okay.
And then I slightly run the output delays, 20 to 30 milliseconds, so that they thicken up and they sort of chorus out a little bit. And then in the Allen and Heath, they have a plugin called Double Double, which is a sort of detuning doubler with a really nice stereo image. And if that goes on the bus or on the input, you can use it as an insert. What happens is that your 2 leads can be, as you see them, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, or whatever it is. And then the background vocals wrap around, and you can add a little more air at 11, 12K, a little boost in there, unless you're using mics that already have that in it.
Yeah.
And then you're thickening them up. And the trick is that you don't want to hear the effect. So when you use the bus for your background vocals and you create this round, sort of slightly wider stereo image, when you have that many vocals, you bring up the effect until you can hear it, and then you back down 1 dB.
Yep.
As soon as you can hear it, it's too much. Because in the context of the mix, then what happens is that your 2 main vocals are sort of 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and then the background vocals, without being hard panned, you're no more than just beyond either one. If you have 6, it's depending on how many you have, but because they're on their own bus, and you can then have a little bit of a bus compression thing happening, and actually the D-Live has a pretty solid bus compressor built into it. Just a little,
just a little grit,
long attack, short release.
Yep.
And just a little bit, just to put a little glue on it. And then the lead vocals will absolutely come to life, and you'll feel those vocals just wrap around it, as if it was, on TV. It's a simple trick. Anyway, I go through this whole thing. He's taking video and all this stuff. And when I kind of finished and I let him hear it in the cans, we're playing around with it. And he goes, "Man, thank you," shakes my hand. And then there's applause, and I turn around, there are like 35, 40 people.
You gave a little class.
Went through the whole thing, so I got the whole school. It was kind of fun.
That's great.
But
I do that here. on for producing the show. I compress us both, and I put reverb. I've been doing this for 19
No, I know
years.
You do. It's great.
Yep. I put a touch of reverb and I bring it down 1 dB because we're not in the same room. I'm in New Hampshire. You're
brain,
not.
It has to make sense to your brain.
Correct.
This is something I've been doing with ears for years.
Correct.
Most people, if they're listening to this show in their cars or in AirPods or whatever Beats or whatever headphones or whatever Sennheiser, whatever they're using to listen, your brain wants space. You have the perception of space. And if you can hear it, it's too much. You do a great job of that. It's an amazing thing. When I mix ears, if I'm a monitor engineer and not doing front of house, I always wear the same ears because I have stupid amount of in-ears.
Yeah.
I want to wear as close to what the person I'm mixing is wearing so that I can, you're on JHs or you're on UEs,
whatever.
you're on 64s, whatever it is, CTMs or Future Sonics, whatever it is. It doesn't make any difference. I have to hear what you're hearing as close to what you're hearing as I can get. And one of the things that I do, and one day we should do a whole show on this. We've talked about it since I've been on the show, is a proper starting from zeros way to mix ears.
Oh, well, let's do it.
Because
we'll make that the next episode. Yeah, not next week, but the next one you're on. Yeah.
But you have a way of doing it that I think is really interesting. I've done it since nobody knew what in-ears were. And the way that I do it now is different from the way I had done it 10 years ago and different than the way I had done it 25 years ago.
So we'll share our things and we'll yell at each other about it. Yeah.
But I have a pretty cool way. In fact, I'm talking to a couple of people about doing some videos to make available to the churches and all of houses of worship, because there's this thing, just turn up, and it's what's happening is that there's some backlash and there's the potential for legal problems is greater. So having this available, it's really not that tough, but it doesn't make sense because your brain says, I can't hear that, I'll make that louder, and that's not going to work. Anyway, that was kind of a fun thing to see some of these mixers.